Most of the advice that's out there about having a blog is not for coaches and service providers and people who sell their own services as their monetization method. Most of the advice out there is for bloggers. And I always say, you are not a blogger, you are a coach with a blog or a consultant with a blog. And there is a huge difference between those two things.
Welcome to the Process to Profit podcast, where we find out about the key processes and productivity techniques that drive successful service-based businesses. Whether you're just starting out or looking to scale, join us as we uncover practical strategies to streamline your operations and help you make more money by boosting your profitability. Let's get started. My guest today is Jana O. Jana talks a lot about blogging for coaches and service providers, and so I invited her on today to talk to us about blogging. So, Jana, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so why don't you tell everyone kind of a little bit about yourself, where you came from, why blogging, all of those wonderful things.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I have been in online business for about 8 years, and I had a whole, career before that. I was in corporate HR and studied marketing and did a little bit of marketing as well, but mostly like organizational development. But when I took my business online, I knew that because I was a natural writer, I really wanted to make writing and my website the focus of my business. However, I decided to, direction to take it in. And when I was working early on with clients, I was helping with content strategy and writing because those were really my fortes. One of my very first clients had me working on her Pinterest account, and I absolutely fell in love with Pinterest for its ease in terms of helping people get more eyes on their content. And so for many years in the beginning, I was a Pinterest strategist, and I did mostly done-for-you Pinterest setups. You know how we kind of fall into like doing something that we know how to do that's very like niche. So I was doing done-for-you Pinterest setups for coaches and service providers for the longest time. And I created a course because, like a lot of us, I wanted to have a course that people would be able to take if they couldn't afford to hire me for thousands of dollars to do their Pinterest. And that was really good for a long time. I marketed that course and my own services using my blog. And blogging and Pinterest are very go hand in hand. Eventually, I realized that a lot of my clients who I'd been working with for 4, 5, 6 years, coaches and service providers primarily, I was working with a lot of health and wellness coaches especially. Not only did they want to use Pinterest, but they also really wanted my help with knowing what to pin to Pinterest. And when they said that over and over again, yeah, but Jana, what do I pin? What do I pin? And I was like, well, what do you mean? What do you pin? You pin your blogs, you pin your service pages, you pin your podcast episodes, you pin Instagram posts if you want to. It evolved over the years, but eventually it finally hit me that they were asking me not only like, what do I pin, but like, what do I pin? What do I write in this content, like to get people to take action on it and hire me? And I was like, oh. So I started, I pivoted in that direction about 2 years ago. Finally, I heard the call and started working on that. So I have a course called High Leverage Content, which is a course where I teach my students who are primarily service providers and coaches how to create long form content. Most of my students, like 90% of them are bloggers. They're not bloggers, but they do blogs. And we can talk about the difference. A couple of them here and there, some of them have a podcast or a YouTube channel as their long form content. But basically it's a long form content program. And I teach people how to create long form content that's high converting and is also really easy to repurpose so that you've got a system for content in your business that's driven by your long form content. So that's the really fast version of the story of how I got here.
Well, that is all wonderful. You're a very experienced online business owner compared to some of us who have not been here as long. Though I did start out as a Pinterest strategist also. I was not successful.
I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a fun platform.
It is, yes. It's really, it's changed so much.
Always changing, always.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about blogging specifically for consultants, coaches. So many people are like, oh, social media is where it's at. And you have to be on Instagram and you have to be on Threads and you have to be on all these places.
Right.
Why do you kind of go the other way and actually push long form for people? Why do you believe that that's what's really the key?
Yeah, so many reasons. And I think a lot of people are waking up to them, especially now at this time that we're recording. It's 2025. And a lot of people, for many, many reasons, are wanting to be less dependent on social media. The reasons just keep stacking up. It's about spending time and putting your effort into something that's more evergreen, that's lasting, instead of creating things that just get moved down a fast moving news feed and serve the social media platform more than it serves you. There are ethical issues these days, especially that are coming into sharp focus. So there are a lot of service providers and coaches out there, consultants, service providers is, I think we use those two words similarly, who would love to have a blog because they're realizing that it's really the power move in this
Hmm.
industry. It's the way to actually have all of your best content on your own website. And there's many reasons why they want a blog. But a lot of them also feel fearful of committing to a blog because they're afraid of adding something that seems like a really big deal and a big time suck, honestly, to their plates. And they're just not really accustomed to thinking about how a blog would work for them, because most of the advice that's out there about having a blog is not for coaches and service providers and people who sell their own services as their monetization method. Most of the advice out there is for bloggers. And I always say,
Hmm.
you are not a blogger, you are a coach with a blog or a consultant with a blog. And there is a huge difference between those two things. We could talk about that forever, but one of the main difference is that you do not have to blog consistently. You don't have to blog every week or every month. Everybody's like, what, when I say that, but you don't. The way I do it and the way I teach it on high leverage content is I teach you to create 12 to 20 evergreen posts that answer all of the basic things that your audience needs to hear and learn and understand more deeply to be ready to buy, to feel ready and excited to hire you. Um, and when you have a blog that covers those basic things, then what you can do is create those posts and then stop creating more blog posts. It doesn't mean you never create another blog. If you really want to create another one, you can, like, go ahead and
Hmm.
write a blog post next month if you want to, if something has come up that you really want to have a post on your website about. But you don't have to be thinking to yourself, okay, now I have a blog and that means I'm going to blog every, week or month for the rest of my damn life. It's really, you create these 12 to 20 pieces and then you just repurpose them. And I believe strongly that repetition is actually what creates sales for people like us, for coaches and service providers, not coming up with new things to say all the time.
Hmm.
And so if you go this route and you create your long form content very strategically, and I teach a very strategic process to choose your topics and whatnot, and then you go ahead and you just repurpose what you've created, essentially what you're doing is you're setting yourself to repurpose and repeat the same key high converting messages over and
Hmm.
over and over in all the places. And doing that is actually what creates sales for us and gives us the leverage that we need to run businesses in a sustainable way and have content that converts our audiences, but have it not take over our lives. So that's really like the system or the process, let's say process, that I believe in when it comes to content for coaches and service providers. It's a different game altogether than someone who is a content creator, who's a blogger or an influencer, right? Totally different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So that all sounds wonderful. But then you hear people saying, well, if I'm not creating new things, how do I keep coming up with content? How do I keep creating, Instagram posts or threads posts?
yeah,
Like, am I really just saying the same thing over and over again? What would you
yeah,
say to people who are skeptical about that?
yeah. There's a lot of reasons why people are worried about repeating themselves. And so it's important to kind of dig into what it is about the idea that's bothering that person, if I'm going to be advising that person in particular. Sometimes people feel like they're going to bore their audience. And I just don't believe that's true. I liken it to like a concert, like when you go see your favorite band in concert. Are you waiting around for them to play their new music from their album that they're releasing next week? And you're so excited for the time they do that? No. You're waiting for them to play their hits, right? Like when
Yep.
they say like, "Oh, we're gonna play some new music now from our new album," where you're like, "Where's the bathroom?" Our audience actually wants us to repeat the same things because it shows that we're steadfast. It shows that we are trustworthy, that we are still the person who is the expert on that topic that they associate with us. So there's that. And a lot of times it's all about timing in terms of when your message lands. You can say the same thing 6 times in a row. And then on the seventh time, because a month has passed by, something has changed in that person's business or life, and it just hits different. Like we've all been in that situation where we see someone post something and we're like, oh, that's what they meant when they said that,
I get
because
it now.
something clicked for us, and it's usually has to do with what's going on in our own lives or businesses. So that's important. And then the other thing is like, you're not an influencer. You're not a content creator. No one's coming to you for new inspiration all the time. they're actually, you want people attracted to you because of the problems that you solve, not because of, they want to know what you're eating this week, or they want to know, where you're going on vacation and stuff. I mean, that stuff's nice. But so I would just say if someone's skeptical about it, the proof is in the pudding. When you look at the most successful people who make the most sales, if you really look at their content, they're not saying new things all the time. They're saying the same basic things in different ways, and they're actually repeating the same things in the same ways sometimes as well. And if you have 12 to 20 pieces of long form content, the way I teach people to write it in HLC, they're very detailed, they're rich. And so you can easily break a piece of one blog post down into, many, many pieces of micro content that you can use over and over again. So even though you're repeating yourself, you're not literally saying the same thing every day. You have 12 to 20 different kinds of sort of lenses to kind of look at what you do through. And you're showing people, those same concepts in different ways through different lenses, really. So it's not too repetitive, but you are repeating yourself in the way that I teach it.
So let's dig into that a little bit more. How does someone take those 12 to 24 pieces of content and create more content? What does that process look like? Because I hear that and I'm like, oh, that's a lot of content to be pulling from. Whereas if I'm doing one blog post a week, then it's easy for me to know kind of what I'm talking about all the time. Okay, this week I'm covering this. And so these are the topics I'm talking about in all my other pieces of media. How do you take sort of evergreen content and change and do repurposing with it that way so that it's not overwhelming? What does that process look like?
Yeah. So I teach a few different methods and workflows, if you will, in the repurposing section of the program. But I would say that based on what you just said, it sounds to me like you like the kind of system where this week my main topic is this, or this month, my main topic is this, or this 2-week period, and everything kind of spins out from there. And I like that too. I enjoy doing that too. It's very organized and cohesive, and we love that, right? So I wouldn't change anything about the way you're doing things. What I would do is that if you have 12 blog posts on your website, or 18, let's say, because my students can create anywhere between 12 and 20, and then once they have what they need, they stop. Then you go back and you start at the beginning again. So if you think about it, if you break the year down into 2-week cycles, for example, and you have 12 pieces of content, then you talk about one topic that is driven by that piece of content one for 2 weeks, and then you move on to content piece 2. And that just means that 6 months are going to go by before you actually get to the beginning again. And when you get to the beginning again, if you want to talk about the exact same things in the same way, I guarantee you that's fine.
Nobody's going to remember.
Right. Well, hopefully they do, because I actually like to say that I want them to remember. I'm not embarrassed that I'm repeating myself. I want them to remember that this is what I talk about, and this is how I believe, what I believe, and how I do things differently than, the one next to me or whatnot. So I'm happy if they remember, but it's going to be fine. They're going to be fine. They're going to love it just as much as they loved it the first time, and it probably will hit differently for them, as discussed. And then you also have the option, of course, to mix things up, and instead of using the exact words again for a post, which again really isn't a problem 6 months later, but if you want, you can.
I was going to say, that's the part that I meant that they weren't going to remember, was that they weren't going to remember the exact words, probably.
Right. Yeah. Good point by you. Yeah, so I wouldn't even necessarily change anything. If that's your workflow, that's great. You just, instead of constantly coming up with new things to say, you are, leaning into the repetition that we know creates sales, and you're just reusing what you already have.
All right. So where does AI fit into all of this? Because there are some strong opinions out there about using AI for copy, using AI for writing blogs. I use AI a lot for writing copy in my business, and I have spent a lot of time figuring out how to make it sound like me. But what's your opinion on using AI to write blogs and copy? And now that I've just admitted to you that I do it. And how does it fit into the process that you use and the process you recommend to your students?
Yeah, really great question. I am very pro AI. I personally am a big ChatGPT fan. I know some people like other AI tools, and that's great too. But ChatGPT works great for me, and that's what I teach inside of high leverage content. And we use it in a lot of different ways. You asked kind of where it fits into the system or the processes. And it fits in the beginning when you are ideating and trying to decide which topics are going to be in your content plan, what 12 to 20 things am I going to write about? What are the things that my audience needs to hear and learn and understand more deeply to be ready to buy? So we use AI to brainstorm. And actually, it's funny because a lot of people think AI is like, oh, it's so basic. Like ChatGPT gives me the most basic stuff. But actually, sometimes that basicness of it works to our advantage because it's basically aggregating data that's out in the world. And so sometimes it'll give us these basic quote ideas. If you're listening and not watching us, I'm air quoting when I say basic, that actually really we shouldn't overlook because sometimes our audience actually needs the basics, even though we are a little bit like not as excited by writing about the basics sometimes. That's a whole other topic. But sometimes you do need to cover the basics, right? So we use it there and we use it all along in the process. But I think probably the place where I think it's most relevant for our coaches and service providers is actually in the drafting and the writing, because inside of HLC in the second half, once we have our content plan, I teach a 4-step writing process. And part of those steps are bringing your own thought leadership to the table, which is, of course, absolutely essential when you're using AI. You can't just say to AI, like, hey, write me a blog post about X topic, and then have it come out perfect without giving it any context about what you want to talk about, what you believe that's different, who you're helping, what you do. Like all those things need to be part of the process. But we bring that into the process by having this like 4-step writing process. But when we get to the step 2, which is drafting, we do use GPTs, which are specially trained ChatGPT bots. And I know, if your listeners don't basically know what that means, it's essentially, I've created these 9 GPTs, and each one of them corresponds to the 9 types of content that I want my audience to be creating. And basically they take your thought leadership and they pair them with my content frameworks and content outlines. So it's like a little collaboration. It's like your thought leadership X, that collaboration thing, that collaboration trend thing, paired with these high converting content formats that I teach in the program to generate the first draft of your blog. There are still things you need to do to flesh out and refine that piece of content. And we have a thought leadership checklist in the system to make sure that you're doing those things. But using AI to generate the draft in that way has cut down my students' writing time to, sometimes it would take them like a whole day to write a blog, maybe even a day and a half. And now a lot of them are writing blog posts in like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I have one woman who swears up and down that she's writing her soup to nuts, all 4 steps of the process in like 45 minutes. I'm like, oh my God, I need to watch over your shoulder and see how you're doing this. Because to me, that's fast. But yeah, so I think AI really does play an important role in having a blog possible. But we, of course, have to bring our own thought leadership to the process. And so any process that you're going to use, whether it's mine or someone else's, needs to be pairing those 2 things together. The speed and the ease of the AI with a way to, inform the AI writing process about your thought leadership so that it can incorporate that. And then also having steps after the draft where you are checking it and incorporating things that need to be in there to make sure that it is representing your thought leadership in an accurate and thorough and responsible way.
Yeah, things like client stories and your personal experience, I'm guessing things like that. Yeah.
Yep. And AI can help us with some of that as long as we're inputting some of that.
Yes.
But yeah, exactly. Those are perfect examples of the types of things that you want to be incorporating that are part of your own lived experience and thought leadership.
Yeah. I have a custom GPT called Sue, which was an accident. I did not mean to name her Sue, who helps me write Threads posts.
Yeah.
And I was creating the custom GPT and it was like, how would you like, Threads post creator as a name? And I meant to write sure. And I wrote Sue. I forgot the R and it was like, all right, Sue. So now Sue helps me write Threads.
I love that. That's so great.
So, which is good because now I feel like, oh, I'm talking to Sue, like as opposed to it's, anthropomorphizing it more than probably is healthy. But anyway.
I love that. No, it's great.
So speaking of Threads, what about repurposing and using AI? How can AI help us repurpose our existing blog posts? Can we use AI for that? What would that look like?
Yeah, I don't teach that part of it, to be honest. I do it for myself and my own content. But basically, the way that I look at it is if you are focused on long form content first, you will have an unending amount of short form content that you can generate, obviously, from that long form content. Some of it's just about cutting and pasting and tweaking. I personally feel like I get better results that way because I'm a long form content girly than if I put my blog post into ChatGPT and be like, here, write me 10 threads about this. I don't
Mm-hmm.
find that that works the best for me, but I'm sure I haven't explored a lot of ways to make it work, and maybe Sue can help me. Uh,
Sue could probably help you.
Sue, she'd be happy to help me. Sure,
Yes.
Sue would be happy to help me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm sure there's great tools out there, but I wouldn't say that that's like my modus operandus. I instead use threads differently. I just pretty much write these days still in threads, like whatever I'm thinking, or I'm repurposing lines or sections of my blog posts and my emails. So I would say it's probably I'm doing about like 70 to 80% just like writing whenever I'm thinking about on threads. And I don't literally mean whatever I'm thinking about. I mean like things related to content strategy, things that are going to help position me as the thought leader in this space. And then using like my 20 to 30% is just copying and pasting and zhuzhing up things that I'm repurposing from long form content that I've written. It's a
Mm-hmm.
little different on other platforms. On Instagram, I'm doing much more repurposing and less like in the moment, like whatever writing, because threads to me still feels like very energetically, like I still want to be very
Conversational.
conversational, yeah, energetically on
Yeah.
threads, whereas I don't feel that desire on Instagram right now. So it is what it
I don't know
is.
that many of us do,
Yeah.
desperately trying to get away from it. So,
Mm.
one thing we haven't talked about in all of this is SEO.
Mm.
So, do you consider and discuss SEO in your course? How does that kind of play into
Yeah.
this? Does it impact your SEO if you're not constantly creating new content? How
Yeah.
does that all kind of fit
Yeah,
together?
that's a great set of questions. And I feel like that last one I might forget to answer, so I'm going to answer it
I'll
first.
come back to it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. Or you can just do it first.
Okay.
That's fine too.
So you do want to be updating your blog posts, even if you write 12 to 20 and then they just, that's all, right? It's an interesting, I had a great conversation with someone on Threads about this the other day. And that's definitely something that you'll want to do anyway, because when you write a piece of content and then, 4 or 5 months go by and you've come up with like kind of new ways to teach something or new ways to think about something, going in and updating your posts to make sure that they reflect your current thought leadership and maybe your evolved thought leadership is always a good idea. And that's naturally going to happen. So that's number one, is you're always updating things a little bit here and there. And then in practice, like I already have 12 to 20 pieces of content on my blog, but I still from time to time have something new that comes up that I do really want to write a piece of content about. So when that happens, I'll dip into my HLC process. I'll use my GPTs now these days and I'll write a new piece of content and put it on my blog. So in practice, we are doing updates. But back to the beginning and the beginning of the question, I have found inevitably, in my 8+ years in online business, that whenever anyone starts a blog, if they try to start by saying, what SEO keywords do I want to write around? They do not. And when I say they, let me back up and say coaches and service providers, not people who have food blogs, not fashion bloggers, not people who write dog and animal blogs. I'm talking about people who have a blog for their business to promote their services, not people who have a blog for traffic and monetize with ads, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those of us who are service providers, coaches, if we try to start a blog and we're trying to start it with an SEO strategy and keywords to write, you're not going to get very far. 1 in 100 people might continue writing past writing a few blog posts, but most people feel pretty like stymied creatively, and they don't get specific enough because they're trying to write based on the search intent for very broad keywords, because only broad keywords in our industry tend to have the kind of search volume that the gurus and the bros are telling us is high enough for us to go after for SEO. There's a lot of
Guilty.
problems.
I have fallen into that trap.
Lot of problems with trying to start your blog with SEO and keywords in mind. So the way that I teach it is the way that I did it and the way that all my friends that I know who now rank on Google with their blogs did it when they first started, which is to simply think, what do my audience need? What do they need to learn and hear and understand more deeply to be ready to buy from me, to be ready to hire me? By going through the process that I teach to establish what those topics are, you are picking topics that are going to be indexed favorably on Google. Whether you're going to rank or not is going to depend a lot on like your industry and the competition that's out there among other websites that do things that are similar than you, things like that. But you're automatically going to be writing for humans and writing based on what people actually need, which actually is the basis of real SEO work. It's not really about keywords and backlinks and all the technical tricks with SEO. It's really about writing posts that humans want to read about topics that humans want to read about. So as long as you're writing posts that humans want to read about topics that humans want to read about, then you're setting yourself up for the possibility of long-term success with SEO. But the other thing is that a lot of people who come to my course, they can't wait 6 months or a year for SEO to kick in and start giving them enough traffic. They need clients now. So when we write content based on what our audience needs to feel ready to buy, and we know we're going to be repurposing it to different places as well, we're able to do both. We're able to get fast results and get clients with our content, but we're also setting ourselves up for, SEO success down the road if it's in the cards for our type of business, which it's not for all types of business, So it's important to kind of note that. So that's how I approach it. And it's a little controversial, especially among the SEO folks, but I just don't think that when you're first starting a blog, you need SEO. In fact, I think it stops people and slows them down and keeps them from actually having the blog at all, because it gets you in your head about what you're writing in too many weird ways. And then I will say briefly too that there are some people who take HLC who actually already have a blog and they have been blogging for a while and they are even getting traffic from SEO, but it's not converting. And so that's the other side of that coin as well, is just because you're getting traffic and you're writing content about things that people, that the keywords that are broad enough, if they're not connected enough to what you do, and if you're not writing conversion friendly content, then all that traffic isn't as exciting as you thought it was going to be. And so I have students in that situation who join HLC and they're writing these types of blogs because now they want to get some of that traffic to actually convert and become their clients. And that's another way that you can go about using this process if you aren't new to blogging, but you need a better strategy for conversion too. So
yes, I am also guilty of that. I have a blog post that ranks, but it's from my previous I was doing leadership coaching before I moved into systems and processes, and it's ranking for that, and it's not converting into anything. They're clicking on that blog post and then clicking right away, and I really need to revisit it, and I just haven't spent the time yet. So I'm hearing all of that.
I was just talking to my friend Heather on our YouTube channel. We have a weekly YouTube show about some of my old posts that rank, and I actually ended up putting affiliate links for other courses in those posts because they were getting so much traffic. And so I decided to find a course that I really liked on that topic and use it as an affiliate link. And I've made 2 sales in the last year by doing that. I don't know if that's something you could consider, if there's a service or product that you could affiliate for that would be aligned with that blog post.
Yeah, I don't know that the whole post is about like icebreaker games for remote teams. Like how can you work with a remote team to get to know each other better and what games can you play and everything. So I don't know that there's anything affiliate wise I could do that. What I really need to do is rewrite it to position it for small business owners, but I just haven't done that yet.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, that's a tangent, but just an idea.
Yes. And it's probably valid for some of our listeners who might like be in that same position that have posts that are ranking, but maybe aren't the right ones or maybe aren't the ones that they want to be ranking. Does your course and your process help with that? Does it help with rewriting existing posts to kind of fit into the process that you talk about?
Yeah, in theory, you can take a look. Let's say you have a post about a certain topic. You can identify which of the 9 pillars that I teach that this post is about, or similar, I guess. It's a type of content. And then look at my strategic outlines for that type of content and say, okay, how can I rewrite this post with the same topic to be kind of like aligned with this content structure that's actually a high converting content structure? But in practice, whether people really do that versus picking a new topic that's actually more relevant for their existing audience now, I think it's probably the latter is happening more than people rewriting existing content. I think sometimes when we're trying to retrofit stuff that is older, it doesn't always work as well as just being like, you know what, I'm willing to start from scratch. And it used to be that we'd have to write a whole new blog post from scratch and we're slogging through mud to do it, and we had to give up a day to do it. Now, with the writing process I teach, back to the AI thing and the GPT, it's not going to take you that long. So why not write something that's aligned with what you are helping with today and, not try to retrofit something, right? So yes, but what I recommended in practice, there are very few situations probably where I would recommend that in practice.
All right, makes sense. put your effort where it really will make a difference as opposed to where it doesn't kind of matter.
Well,
Um,
always, right?
right? I mean, in general, in life. So you've talked a lot about sort of the 9 types of content. And without getting too in the weeds, kind of what is the general recommendation you make towards approaching content for coaches and consultants? What are sort of the types of content that you do recommend? And by types of content, I don't necessarily mean like topics, but like, do you recommend blog posts, or is it better to do YouTube videos, or is it better to do
Oh,
podcasts, or does it kind of depend on the person? So what are your thoughts on that? Or is it really just person and business dependent?
yeah.
That
Um,
question went way different than I expected it to. So,
no, I get it. Yeah, so there's kind of like two questions in there. So I think I'll answer both. At a high level, the way that I believe things should be in your business, especially for people who are getting started or people who haven't found their like consistency rhythm yet with visibility, is that you have one long form platform, one long term content platform. So that would be a blog or a YouTube channel or a podcast. I sometimes have students come to me and say like, "Oh, I want a blog and a podcast," and I'm like, "Great, but start with one, and then once you're like done with these 12 pieces, you can turn them into a podcast if you want, and start there, and like then lean into having a podcast, and that's a different beast." But
hmm
and then you have one or two outposts, which could be like social media. I consider Substack an outpost, not a blogging platform, for example. And then the third type of content would be emails. So to me, it's those three things, and you can make it more complicated than that. And we often try, but in my opinion, when you're starting, you shouldn't. So that's kind of like the high level like ecosystem in terms of like what types of content I recommend. I'm really partial to a blog too, because I really love that you can change a blog. You publish something and then you can go back and update it, similarly to what we talked about before. And I don't mean the retrofitting conversation. I mean like the freshening it to make sure it matches with your current
Right.
thought leadership kind of way of freshening it. And then as far as types of content, I don't like talk about like the specific pillars basically, but and of course I do, of course. But I will say that what's one thing that's important when you're looking at what types of content you're going to write, if you're going to write 12 to 20 pieces of like highly strategic content, is to make sure that they're not all the tips and tricks content. So
Mm.
in the way I teach it in HLC, some of them are, and that's okay. I'm not going to take all your tips and tricks away from you. I'm not going to make you never teach anyone anything in your blog, because people do expect that from long form content. They want you to go deep, and sometimes going deep means teaching things. But you want to find a balance and make sure that you're not only putting stuff on your blog that's all
Mm.
teaching and tips and tricks. There are certain types of content that you also need that are more conversion focused. So half of like the 9 types of content that I teach fall under what I call the expertise pillars, and then the other half fall under the conversion pillars. And you really need a good balance of all of
hmm
that to make sure that you have a high converting suite of content. Some people will err on the side I just mentioned where everything is all education, and it's like people just take the education, and then they run. Essentially, they don't have all the other things
Yep.
they need from you to feel ready to buy. But then there's also people, and I would say like maybe 70% of people like err on the side of too much education. There are also people who do the opposite, and we all know we've seen those people like in different places, social media, but they sometimes will do it on their blog if they have long form content too, where it's like they really never get into the deepness of it, and they're just talking about, you should buy, you should buy, you should buy, basically, right? Or that's how it feels, because it's all like either about them or about the reasons
Their
why.
process.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
which is important. Like that's part of what people need,
hmm
but it's not the whole, it doesn't fulfill every piece that people need. And having a balanced suite of content, the way that I teach it, like one of the reasons I teach that balance is because literally, like I said, people need all these things, not just a few of them. These are the 9 things people need to feel ready to buy. And if you only have half of them, whether they're all educational, or they're all just buy my thing, is not going to work. So yeah, so I would say that that's one thing I could definitely share about the pillars, is like we need to find that balance. And
hmm
you know who you are. If you're listening and you err on one side, you gotta balance. And if you err on the other side, again, you gotta balance. We need all of it. We need both.
And that's the same whether they're writing blog posts or doing
It,
other types of long
yeah.
form content,
Oh,
right? It's
totally.
not
Yeah.
just for blog
No,
posts.
and
And
it's
so,
short form too. People need that for short form
yeah.
too. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and so high leverage content, you didn't call it high leverage blogging. You called it high leverage content. So does it would your course apply to people who do have a YouTube channel or a podcast instead of a blog?
It does, yeah. All the same frameworks and processes apply and work. Like with my 4-step writing process, there's actually a separate like training in the system that talks about like how to what's the word, like modify the 4-step writing process in like certain little ways if you're recording, meaning you have a podcast or a YouTube channel. I'd say like I said, like 90% of my students do blogs, maybe 95%, and only a few of them do other things. And I'm not sure if that's because they're attracted to me and I'm partial to blogs, or if it's because I've had a blog for years. That's how I've sold my services. Or if it's because the blog, I think in a lot of ways is lighter lift, which it definitely is because you just have to write. But
Yes.
yeah, I think a blog is where it's at. But yes, I have people using this method for podcasts and long form YouTube channels as well, not YouTube channels that are only about the shorts.
Yeah. Starting a podcast is not for the faint of heart. I can say that right now.
Yep, we'll take it from
And not
you.
for the people who just want to sit and write, that's for sure,
Yeah.
especially video podcasts.
Yeah.
Because I can't just sit here and record. I have to actually like be presentable. In my own mind. Nobody has forced me to do that, I will say. Well, thank you so much, Jana, for being here. What is one final thought, fact, important thing you want to leave our listeners and watchers with?
I would say just like, if you're among the people out there who are just like tired of creating a lot of content, just remember that it really isn't about the volume. If you're a coach or service provider, you don't have to compare yourself to influencers or bloggers per se. It's really more about creating less content, but having a strategy when you're choosing your topics and knowing what goes into content to make it high converting. It's not so much about like fire hosing with new content all the time or, just having tons of content. That's not where it's at for people like us. So I think just like that intentionality is what I want more than anything for people to really like key into and start factoring in more into their businesses and into their marketing than people have been in the last, I don't know, several years.
Yeah, since 2020 at least, if not more than that.
yeah.
So, well, great advice, something I need to learn to take to heart and stop going for quantity over quality. Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you want to offer our listeners for free?
Well, I actually write emails to my list that are, people like them a lot.
I'm on your email list. I have been for quite a long time now.
Yeah.
So yes, I can attest to that.
My emails, I have a lot of people who get a lot of big shifts and transformations just from getting my free emails. And a lot of what I talk about with content and helping people see things in different ways is what I'm sharing there. I share there all the VIP content as opposed to the little bits that sometimes I occasionally think to put on threads. So anyone who likes the ideas that I've put forward and wants to hear more about them and any of my other spicy opinions about blogging and marketing and being a coach or service provider and getting more clients with your content can sign up for my email. So you just go to my website, which is janaomedia.com/emails is where you'll be able to go and add your name in your email address.
That's important.
Yes, to get my high leverage hits emails. I call them high leverage hits, and they come out usually once or twice a week. I send more emails than that, but once or twice a week, the high leverage hits ones are the ones that kind of go deep and really bring people on like the little aha moment. They're not journeys, but like give people those little aha moments that they need to be doing their content in a more intentional and more effective way.
Yeah, I really enjoy your emails, so I highly
Thank
recommend
you.
everyone else gets on there. I will make sure that the link is included
Thanks.
in the description below and in the podcast notes. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that? What social, we talked about Threads a lot. Is that kind of the best place for them?
Yeah, but there's no DMs.
I know, that's true.
You can tag me on Threads if you have a question. That's totally cool. But yeah, actually just send me an email if someone, I'm just me, just Jana at janaomedia.com. I answer all my own emails. So I would say just send me an email. Yeah.
All right, great.
Okay.
I will include that in the show notes as well. Again, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our conversation.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Great. And thank you all for listening and for watching. And I will talk to you again soon. Bye.